Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the workshop on how to build your custom dashboard for your board products. So let's begin with my introduction. I am Akshay Sinha, a third year student pursuing BTech in Electronics and Communication. I'm well versed with a few languages like C, C++, Python, Kotlin, JavaScript, etc. These are the basic languages everyone should know. And I have a few skills in front-end web development, IoT automation, robotics, cloud computing, extended reality, and video production as well. So what you will learn today. Let's start with today's agenda first. We'll start with basics of web development and the tools required to have a proper functioning for a static page. All of it will be well explained because I don't want anybody to worry about or have any doubt of any part of this dashboard script. I will mention and explain every bit of it so that you can build it for yourself. After the basics, we'll practically build a few web pages. More like I'll send the script to you, but you will know what's really happening in them, how the functions work. And meanwhile, I will also explain how the Bolt module functions with the API calls. And will not use anything from the training course. Anything that was present in here, nothing will be present over this workshop. I will tell you everything from the scratch, how those functions work, so that you can build your own functions later on. We'll talk about how to use web storage temporarily to store your information. Then we'll look at some custom gotcha that I built recently and how it uses analog A0 pin to check your temperature, your humidity, anything. And later on, when once you are done with the whole workshop, you'll be able to build one for yourself. And you'll also have my script ready. So if in case you want to build your own, you can. And in case you want to use my script, you can do that as well. After that, we'll talk about some importance of UI and UX, that is user interface and user experience when making a project. Because it be for an app or web page, a good interface is required for any developer. Because once you're building a project, you cannot just have a dull looking uh, page in here. You cannot show off that, right? So for that, we need something that is a good interface so that any non-technical skilled personnel can also use your project later on, so that you'll be industry ready later. In the end, I'll send something extra for you, but nothing comes for free, of course. You'll have to do a task for me, and then you'll be able to have the floor mounting dashboard as well as Python script for controlling the Bolt device without the Bolt IoT package. So we'll see a good brief about how the dashboard works, how my dashboard works, but we'll also teach you how to build the dashboard for yourself. So these are the three layers of web development. Um, the basic layers that we call, because without the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we'll never see any website loitering around in the internet. The basic layer where HTML contains the content. Without the HTML, there is no CSS. Any web page you see on the internet has three basic layers, that is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. As you can see, HTML is the most basic requirement for a web page, because whatever you see in the page is the content written in HTML format. Using other available scripts, styling functions, we control it. But without HTML, there is no web page. Everything like CSS, JavaScript, or any other framework requires the HTML to be called into. So, and for the design and look of the HTML content, its size, color, shape, anything, its position, everything is controlled by CSS. That's why we call it presentation. CSS works somewhat like Adobe Photoshop or Lightroom, you can say, and everything that relates to designing or moving of in the web page is done in CSS. It's more about styling of the HTML content. And JavaScript is a language. So it's a programming language, because every website, every web page needs a functioning to be happening, right? So there'll be a few students over here who have used the single buttons or made a graph in board cloud, right? In board cloud configuration tab. Uh, the output gives you the buttons or graph, and you mostly code it in JS script and JS extension, right? So that is JavaScript, and what you do over there is you just that part is just called into your HTML program. Like few of the students are there who ask how to write this like same board that graph coding for HTML. I've seen recently in the forum. These questions arises because they don't know the difference between JavaScript and HTML. uh, I'll clear this part so that you don't get confused about this. When we create an HTML in bold cloud to create buttons, we're writing the code by ourselves, and that's what we see when we view it in our when we deploy after deploying the configuration. When we view it, we see the HTML file, right? But when we create an JS and JavaScript file in the bold cloud, by default it has its own HTML file. The cloud itself has its own HTML file, and the JavaScript file is only called into the function. So what you view is the HTML, but it has your JavaScript functions included. Therefore, when you want to build a project that needs recognition, it is necessary to have your own set of functions, own buttons, own graphs instead of using the bold cloud dashboard. But remember that it is necessary to have a bold cloud pro account, because bold is an amazing platform. They have created a module that makes it super easy for IoT developers to bring ideas to the market with much less effort and processing and codes. So although it's currently present in ESP 8266 modules only, later let's hope that it comes for ESP32 also. uh, I will start next. We'll talk about the basics, a sample of HTML. Everybody knows about this, everybody has seen how to write a CSS, right? When you are writing selectors for tags, main tags like head, body, then this is the this is the protocol you have to follow. When you are calling IDs or class, you have to follow hashtag and dot. Selector would be the one on the top. Then you have to start with the curly brackets, and then you will have the key and the value pair, where your key would be something like background color, your colors, your padding, text align, whatever you're trying to define, the property you're trying to define will be on the left hand side, and with the column on the right hand side, it will contain the value. So this is the syntax of the CSS file. Next, the JavaScript, which most of the students are not aware about. Look into this also, how to write a JavaScript file, because without the JavaScript, without the programming, your web page would be dead, and there's no point of being a IoT developer with a proper user interface if you don't even know JavaScript. So JavaScript, unlike any other programming languages, even JavaScript is very easy. So it's very important to know how JavaScript works and why it is essential for every engineer, not just IoT developer. Every engineer should know JavaScript. So we'll talk about what is document.getElement, what is DOM styles. We'll talk about that, and how it has, like any other languages, it also has some protocols to be followed. Some variables instead of any like in Python we don't usually define your values, right? But in here we have to define the values we are about to use with the var tag, and then we can directly use function to define the function. And when we call it, we have already seen in the HTML that change one function and change the function now is already present inside the body tag. And when you click on this on these buttons, on these div, on these tags, in this content and the box, then only in the JavaScript these will be called, these functions which were defined in JavaScript will be called. Okay. Uh, For understanding how it practically happens, I will give you the link also. I want you to have a look at this particular sample that I have prepared for you. So what's happening in there? These are ID elements. The ID attributes, it will have their unique identity. When you are defining them, they will have their unique identity in the HTML document. But when you are defining a class, you can use the same selector when you are defining it in the CSS. You'll have the same selector, and it will change the colors or data for that particular selector everywhere. but you can only use one type of ID for the whole web page. How to change them? You have to know JavaScript's language, right? JavaScript uses DOM, where document object model, where it can change the content of any ID or a class name, can change the value of a CSS or an HTML. Both of them you can do using JavaScript. I want you to remove the lower function. The low in the below you see the change to function has been commented out, right? I want you to remove slash and star in the beginning, and star and asterisk and slash in the end. It will that if you do that, it will include that function. Once you do it, you will see that both the colors of the box and the content ID we have created, both of them changed. So how does that happen? We'll use DOM method for that, where when you are writing a document.getElement by ID, it particularly goes to that location where ID content is present, and then in the CSS, not in HTML, it goes to in the CSS file. You can see that in the CSS there is a selector hashtag content, right? It goes there, changes the background color to the given function in the JavaScript when you click on the onClick function. So when you click on the H1 tag, this click also calling the first function. Both of them are working at the same time. First, download the file. Use the instruction I have given in the slide. Extract it, and first change your API key and a device ID from in the control.js. Except button, basic button, there are two other folders, that is read function and write function. So for both of them, just change the API key and device ID in the JavaScript file. So first we'll look at the button interaction, the first basic buttons folder. You can just directly open the index.html file, and you will see this popping up, and you can right away use it. When you click the button over here, the color of the window will change. Now open the HTML in a text editor. There you will see two elements, that is a window and a button, right? Window is the one I have stored in as an ID attribute, and button also an ID attribute, but both have different IDs, so they cannot do the same. They cannot change each other's colors later on. Okay, so first one is a div ID and second was a button ID. But let me tell you that if I remove button over here, and if I change from button to div, and even in the end tag, if I change it from button to div, and the JavaScript also, if I clear out the thing, it will do the same function. You don't need a button tag for using a button or on click. You don't need a button tag for that. I'm using a button tag for some other reason, because the text over it, the text click, if you click on the div ID as a button, then the text over it will get selected. That's why I did not use the div ID and instead use button, because the text that you see above it gets gets inside a different layer. So if you try to copy the text over it, that is the click text, will not be copied, or I mean selected. Okay, so this is the HTML file that you see over there, and if you click on the button, it will trigger the on click function, and it will change the color in the window. So this is the HTML where I have just only defined the structure. This is the structure that you see in front of in the browser. But for colorizing it, for styling it, we need a CSS file. Since we use ID attributes, we have to define it in the CSS as hashtag. You see window and button, right? We have defined it as hashtag window and hashtag button. The first, where we have defined body, means it will be globally the same. It will remain globally same. So if I've used background and this hex code, it will change the color. What is a hex code? I will also tell you that if you just Google any of the hex code, you'll see that Google will return you with a color. So hex color codes can be easily found out or generated from any online generator. If you want color of green, you can have a green color code. Everything is present on the internet, as I have spoke about. So that's it. And then there is margin desktop, right? So what is margin desktop? Okay. So in here, the bottom I have made this thing which is a box model. So look below the syntax, top, bottom, left, right. So when you are defining anything in the HTML, in the text, it is present within the border tag, and the text will be present inside the content. So any type of text, photo, image, anything you want to like show in an HTML file, it will be inside it content itself. But if we talk about background colors and all, it has to be included inside border tag. So if you use padding, if you use a padding of say 20 pixels, 30 pixels, then it will shrink, or it will move to a location where it is equally 20 pixels from all the directions for that model. For example, if you are using a id attribute for content, right, then you will see that inside a box has a white colored box by default, where it is present in the middle, not on the top but in the middle. How did that happen? Because I have used a margin desktop of 1050 px 50 pixel, and when I used a padding of 100 pixels, it equally divided its content on all the sides, from top, left, bottom, and right. Then in there you can do some other settings also for your css, for the positioning, colors, anything you want to make a border. Just use a border tag, border property, and give some width to it. With I gave a 3 pixel width, and which is a solid, and this is the color, has hex color. And then you can use a radius for that. If you do the radius, then it will not have sharp corners. It will have a radial corner of 3 px. You can do your experiments with the code that I have given you. You can just change the file in the text editor and experiment whatever you want to do with the basic buttons first. Okay. Next, hashtag window dot on. What is this? Since you have seen the few of you have seen the JavaScript file, right? There, I've also mentioned something with the class name. I've already added a class list. There, what you see is that when you add a class list, it adds a list. It's a class of one. So when that is added, this one is called, this part, this window.n is on is called. So when that is called, your color, your whatever is present in the that model, that object, is out property. So you can test all these or search them on W3 schools or any other website. They will give you a brief information, but this is what I'm doing for controlling my buttons. So this is all for css. And the control.js, what's really happening, how all of this is functioning. So I've used a document.getElement by id, where this is the condition where on is added, class of on is added. For adding a class, you need a class list dot add. For removing a class, you need a class list dot remove. I have controlled the on tag, on class in here. So using that, your css is controlled, and css is changing the colors or stylings for html5. So that's what is happening in those buttons. So I'm adding class in the id window. So when that happens, the color changes. You can see over here what's happening in the console tag. When you click the button, it adds a class. You can you can zoom in and see that it's yellow in color in the beginning. So you will see that a class of on is added. But if you open only the HTML file, you will not see any class present in the div tag of window. But that happens because I've used JavaScript function. Using JavaScript, I have controlled my HTML. Indirectly, I'm controlling the CSS also. So that's how I can control and change the colors. And for that, interfaces use a lot of that. Now let's connect bold to it. First, we'll do the write functions, where open the write function folder, and there we'll see the HTML. Open it in browser. And before opening it in browser, you have to go to the control.js, change the API key and device ID. When you click on the light 1 and light 2, if you have the port connected and if you have put on your device ID and API key, you will see your light 1, your GPIO 1 and GPIO 2 will function. The window itself works as buttons. So what if you click on if you click on this tag, then the color of the window changes. The color of the button changes. So what I have did is for my project for floor monitoring system, I've followed this protocol where the color of the button only changes so that I am informed that uh, if the light is on or off. And with that, I have included the web storage API. We'll talk about what is web storage and how it functions. So I've included that so that even if I refresh the page, it will tell me if the light was on. Now I wanted to open the index, the HTML file in a text editor. You'll see someone like L1 function and L1 L2 function. Both of them I have defined it with a similar name. You can see that when you click on the on-click L1, it will change the L1, and when you click on L2, it will click on L2. So this is basic. HTML file is quite basic. So this is for what I did, something similar to what you saw in the basic buttons. Uh, the write function also uses something very similar, where L1 has and L1 is present, and L1.on is present, then L2 is present, and L2.on is present. Now, what is this colon hover? If you move your mouse to the buttons, you'll see that they scale up, right? The size increases. I've used this transform and transition for doing that. You can change according to you. If you hover your mouse, your cursor to there, you'll see that this is the part that functions of transform and transition. And if you move out your cursor from the button, the hover part is excluded. Okay, this is the very basic CSS. And here I have used the same syntax as I have used in the basic buttons. Nothing much. But what is happening in control.js? There is a lot in there, right? So for the first part, I will talk about from the right hand side where you see L1 and L2, right? Where function L1 is called. What happens? I have defined an L1 where it is an element ID, and then if it contains that element of on, then it will turn off. Means if I have previously done it, but since by default it has no such class, then it will move to the second condition. I'm talking about L1 function. Okay, it will move to the second condition where digitalRead 1 is present. When I click on L1, whatever is connected to your 1 GPI or 1, it will turn on. It will give on a high. Okay, then second it will move to the second line, that is document.getElementID by ID L1, and which is adding a class, which we did it in basic buttons also. After that, there is window.localStorage.setItem. What this line will do is will store a key L1 and a value on in your browser itself. So if it is a local storage, it will store it forever for your browser. Means even if you close the browser for now, it will have it in your browser. It will have it stored in your local storage. But when we use a session storage, it will store only for that particular session. That means if you close the URL, that whole tab, then it will delete that storage, whatever that was. Using this function, using set item and using remove item, I'm controlling my buttons, so that even if I refresh it, on the left hand side bottom you see read all, right? And below that you see a read all function being called. This is the first function that is run when you refresh your browser. So when read all function is called, it checks if there is any item called L1 with an on value on value present. If it is present, then it will add the class. This happens both for L1 and L2. Okay, this is what's happening when you refresh your page. And on the right hand side, what happens is L1 and L2 being functioned on clicking the L1 and L2 tags. Okay, now this digital write was being called because if you have connected your Bolt module and set up your API key, then you'll see that it's working, but you're not doing it in Bolt Cloud. Then how is it happening? So what I have used for that is, look, when you can do all this by yourself, because how Bolt works is that if you call this below URL, you can control Bolt module. All you need is your API key and your device ID. That's it. What is API key? You'll find it in your Bolt cloud itself. And what is a device ID? That also you'll find. So this is only for digital right now. If you are giving a state high or state low, then it will only return you a value of 1. Okay. This happens only for digital write. And this you can get this data in raw data or in JSON format. So what we do is, if using a digital write, you see obj.success, right? And it returns a 1. So this is the success that you see in here in this condition, in this if condition of obj.success. This is what it's already present in your browser itself. If you run the above URL, you'll find this in the browser. You'll see success 1 is present. So if it returns a success 1, means your means your API call was successful and it has returned some value. Okay. So next, we can also do a digital read, and this is how through your digital read, you can check if your pin is high or low. Okay, so if any module, any sensor has sent you a signal, if the signal is high or low, if the signal is 1 or 0, you can check it by calling this API, right? But how will you show it in your browser? How will you control it using JavaScript? So in a read function folder, you will see two folders are present, with pro and without pro. It depends upon you which one you want to do, because if you have a pro subscription, you can open the with pro, because if you don't, please avoid it, because it or else you will hit a API limit. So I will go with the without pro first, because you can directly go with this. So we have a button, right? We have used a switch. We have the circuit ready with the switch. So there you will see in the HTML file, you will see two attributes are present. One is window and button. But for with Pro, only one attribute is present, that is window. I've used two different folders and for two different kind of people's subscriptions, because uh, without Pro, if you are using without Pro, then you have to keep pressing the button and then click on this click button tag in here. So only then your screen will change. And if you want to reverse, if you want to change the color back to gray, then you can just unpress your button and then click on your web page. You can click the button and it will come back to gray. I hope that, I mean, if you have the script ready with the device ID and the code, I've mentioned everything in the GitHub. I have to be fast with it. So everything is present in your script itself. You can go through it. So what I did in there is, in JavaScript, we'll see if the obj.value 1 is returned, it will first check. It will, if object.success has been returned, then after that it will check for a value. If the obj.value is 1, then it will add a class list, and means it will set it, tell me through the window ID that the pin is high. And if an obj.value of 0 is returned, then it will tell me that that pin is low, and then I can turn off I mean, remove the class, and when I do that, that blue color will change back to gray. So that's all that is happening. And here I have used session storage. I have given you both the types of codes that could be present, so that you can practice upon it and have your own functions ready. And then you will see that all of this was called inside the onClick, right? Below you see a function of onClick. there you will see digital read 0. Currently, I have used only one parameters, but in the bold command.js, if you see, hmm, and here there are two links that I have provided, bold commands.js, and here all the functions are already present. All you need to do is just scroll upon it and you will see ready for you. All you have to do is copy it in your JS file, and according to your comprehension or whatever you want to show in your dashboard or your browser, I mean your web page, you can use those functions. But how they function, I have talked about that right now here. So for non-pro users, this is the steps to follow. Like complete the circuit with a digital read, and when switch comes out, keep pressing the switch, and that's the point where digital read changes to high. And if the switch is pressed in the web page, you have to click the button. Okay, and then the button will send an API request, and if the it will check if the button was high, then it will change the color of the window from gray to blue. And if you release the switch, then the digital will turn to low, and if you click the button again, then you'll see that the window will turn to gray. Okay, but for a pro user, all you need to do is click the button and click your switch in your bull module with on the circuit that I have provided you, or and unclick it, unpress it whenever you want. Then you will see that the color changes. Now, web storage API, we have talked about local storage and session storage, right? So you can follow the instructions in the given here. For Mozilla, you can right click on your browser, click inspect, and then click storage. There you will see that there are two folders present, local storage and session storage. According to your script that I have provided, if it's a session storage call, then you will see that a key of window and value of on is present. If your switch was on, you can, through the PPT, you can know more about, or over the internet, you can know more about what is web storage API and how it functions. Basically, it stores all the data within your browser itself so that it can be called and checked, okay, once you refresh it. So for more functions, you can go through the board commands.js. It will have all the existing functions ready already. All you have to do is include it in your JavaScript file and call it depending upon your web page. And the above link will have all the API URLs, that the remote slash API key slash device ID, everything is present over this URL. So you will have it present. I will send the link. Prakhar Mehta, can you turn off your mic? Thank you.
Hello?
Yes, you can go through these links and you will see that uh, all the functions are already present. All you have to do is call it and use it. Okay. This is an example of what I have made by myself of a few days back, where I've used the analogRead to check and view it in my web browser. The analog data of your LM35, I mean temperature sensor, or your light using LDRs. All you need to do is, I have mentioned in the GitHub documentation itself how to control it. So go do follow it before trying out. So what is the importance of UI? Why do we need a user interface? So when when we are making any product, any industry, any commercial, or any company, or any project you are trying to make, even for any competition, or for your for any event, or for your school itself, then it is necessary that you have a good interface, because unless and until it is well presented, you'll never have any opportunity for yourself. Only with a good user interface you will be able to compete with others, because others with a very dull project, but their presentation was good because the interface was much better than your AI project. Then what's the use of it if you don't have a good ability? Do you think that anyone who is from the non-technical side who does not have any knowledge on how to use these functions, they will be able to use your. No, because unless and until you don't have a good user interface, unless and until your project is easy to use for them, they will not be able to control the models or projects. So it's very necessary. This is a comparison of UX and UI first. So have a good look at it. So what do you see in the left hand side is an user experience, where depending on the psychology of a human being, things are presented. Nobody wants too much data on a single page. Nobody wants that, because what will they look at? On the right hand side is a user interface, where you see a login interface is there, where the bad one has the same color. So if you do that, you see the difference, right? So this is the comparison of a UI and UX, and now is a comparison of a good UI and bad UI. Now I want you to choose which one would you go for, because everyone by now has made something which looks something like the left hand side, right? Yeah, so most of you want the one on the right hand side, and the one that you see on the right hand side is a smart in it. It's a practical, like they have a company, they are doing it right now. Their IoT models are already out for home automation. What I have done is use their home automation for practical use. So what we see is a few examples of flow monitoring. Now these are not any engineers model. These are from a few graphic designers from over the internet. These are the ideas that they have built. But until now, I've never seen any project that looks somewhat like this. You see this 3D type of uh, house, right? Even this is possible because all it has is a few buttons. On the right hand side, it will give you a description of the temperature. Controlling your module through Wi-Fi to the internet is very easy. Anyone can do it. But if you have a good idea of, or you can get a good idea from any of your graphic designer friends on how to design it or how to function it, then they can give you a layout. You can build the same thing in your web, and you can use it as a project for your school or for your any event, anything. And they will surely shortlist you out because they want something that is presentable for the industry. Okay, I will show a practical demonstration of how my flow monitoring works. Okay, so this is my interface right now. As you can see, what I did is I have used a few navigation bar. This is the weather application. This is live data of my from my temperature sensor, this LM35. If I touch it, the sensor's value will change. You can see. So to show you that all this data is live from here, you can see the LM35%. This is the LM35 in here in the breadboard. So the data, everything you see in here is live. Only the mist and this my location, time and date. It is called from a weather API system. I will share it you everything once you have done the task, and you can follow the protocol and follow the instructions, and you can build your own. So in here in my dashboard, this is a drop down menu. You can choose your drop down, and then you can choose your appliance first, and then once you do that, you can control it. See, I have used the hover function even here. I've used everything I could do so that I have a good UI for myself. So once I click, you can see the LED glowing up, right? This is the first pin. This is pin 0. This is pin 1. This is pin 2, 3, and this is pin 4. So this is a very basic project, but what makes it look good is only this interface that you see. Because of these kind of like user interface much better than this. Of course, you can, if you have an idea of how to build a good CSS for yourself, then you can build a much better interfaces for yourself. So what's new in here is that I have used this web storage. So even if I refresh it, and check my appliance, it will return me. It will tell me if the lights were on. Why? Because usually if you refresh it, see my LEDs are still on, right? So if I refresh it for a usual web page, the static web pages that you see, it it doesn't tell you. There's also a drawback in my project on this project. The drawback is that this will return only for your that particular device or that particular system. It will not return this LED on off thing for other devices. Okay, so this is what I could do, and I definitely want to see more from your side. We can build something similar. Yeah, okay. So this is my script for the JavaScript for the flow automation, this whole thing. What makes it so big is because I have used all the functions I could. And what you can do is, for if you want to use multiple bolt modules, you can use an array. Hmm. So the first one has my device ID. So with one API key, you can control multiple devices. This could be your second module, and this could be your third module, right? So what I did is that, look, in L1, I have mentioned that for the first slide, change the device, I mean d underscore device ID, and put it in the variable d underscore name, taking the input from dev AR of for zeroth position. So my zeroth position array, first device ID, the one currently I'm using right now. So the other one, if you want to use, you can just mention in there. You can just mention uh, dev underscore ARR inside a square bracket 1. That's it. Using just the simple array, you can control multiple devices, multiple modules. In a project, you can see that uh, multiple appliances are present. So light, fan, PC, we want to control multiple things and not just one appliance. So for now, since I'm using only light, I mean the LED, and I have only one module, so I'm using only the first array. So the first array is the light, the second array could be the fan, and the third array could be PC. Since I don't have anything right now, so it will give me an error that device does not exist. So this is what I have made. This is the project. Using the basic buttons, using basic buttons, can control your devices. Using basic buttons, can control your devices, and only with basic UI user interfaces, your project could be much better than it used to be earlier. So we were here, right? We talked about the demonstration, right? So I gave you a short look on what it really is. I want you to do something for me. We'll get it all. You'll get the whole script, but I need to make sure that you all will make a good use of it. You can make a good use of this whole all the script that I give you, but you have to prove yourself that you are doing something and you are capable to control it. What I want to do is um, use the syntax, like have the analog read, means use the analog read function instead of digital read, and use from like if the value is in the 5 colors, you can uh, tell me if the temperature is high or low. So if your temperature is somewhere between um, 0 to 50, then return a cold value. For example, return say purple. And if it is somewhere between 50 to 150, then return a blue. If it is somewhere between 150 to 300, return a green, and so on. And you have to return all this in your window. I have also given you a hint on how to use it. So using an if-else function inside the obj.success, when your obj.value contains 0 to 1024 values. Everything is already in the URLs, I mean, the links that I've sent you. The API URL contains how to call an analog read function, because it always returns from 0 to 1024. Everyone knows that. you can use the if else condition inside your obj.success and check for the obj.value. If the value is somewhere between the one you wish, means it has to be around 0 to 1024. So whatever it returns, use that return value and change your window background color. You can change whatever you want according to that, and you have to submit the assignment in the given link. And once I get these assignments, once I get those tasks you have done, I will directly send it to your email ID. You will have the dashboard script to yourself, and you can change and modify it according to yourself. So with this, I also give you another thing that if you follow me on GitHub, I will give you the Python script for controlling the digital multi-write, which is not currently present in the Python module of Bolt IoT. So using that script, you can control multiple pins of your, you can write multiple pins on your module. You have to do this task if you want to. It's up to you. Or else if you do the if you do this, make this project, if you do this assignment, then you get both of it without any efforts. So thank you for this session. If you have any doubt or want to know more or have any more explanation that you need, then I'll be happy to help you. So with this, I'd like to end this session.